Great, thank you, Ian. So I'm Steve Wardell. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Activate Networks, and I'm delighted to come here and tell you about go-to-market strategies. And let's see, I'll kick off. Let me get rid of that on the screen. I'll kick off with a little bit about myself. So I graduated from Harvard Business School in 2000, and also from the MIT Entrepreneurship Lab under Ken Morse and John Preston. I don't know if they're still known today here, but I was very lucky to be able to do that. And that was the hardest thing I ever did at Harvard Business School, was to cross-register and take the MIT Entrepreneurship Lab course here. So I was a student in one of these classrooms first semester, and they welcomed in at that time, I don't know if they still do this today, but they welcomed in entrepreneurial companies in the area, and you were assigned to a team of engineers, Sloan MBAs, Harvard Business School MBAs, and they would have you work for that local company on a project of importance to the CEO. And that helped me get my first job out of business school. So I left business school and the MIT Entrepreneurship Lab determined to make a mark on Boston's entrepreneurial scene. And so I joined my MIT eLab company, which was called EYAC, a next-gen VoIP company. And we raised $74 million, and then we sold it to Synexus, and that was at the height of the dot-com boom, or actually the bubble had burst. We raised the money before the bubble burst, and then it burst, and we sold the company after it burst. So then I went on to be a co-founder of Artisan Pharma, a phase 3 biotech startup, and we raised $20 million and sold the company later to Asahi Kasei Pharma, which is a Japanese pharma company. Now I'm part of the founding management team of Activate Networks, which is a big data social network analytics company. We've raised $15 million and we're in growth phase. Prior to that, to business school, I worked at two of the world's largest companies, Citigroup and Microsoft. So I really took an entrepreneurial path after business school. And I'm delighted to be able to come back here and talk to people at MIT. And I want you to know, by the way, that if you work as I do on Route 128 for young technology companies, everyone there kind of wishes they could go to classes at MIT and wishes they could hang out in Kendall Square and wishes that they could be a part of this sort of yeasty brew that's here in this area, of which MIT is such a big part. So Activate Networks, very interesting company. Basically, there's a Harvard Medical School professor. Uniquely, he was a MD PhD with a PhD in sociology, and he noticed as a practicing doctor what he called the widow effect. And the widow effect was that if an older man dies of old age, this is a crushing social problem for the person's wife, and it's called the widow effect. And oftentimes, the widow will die within about a year. And so he said, why exactly is it? What's the medical reason for that? Well, it wasn't really a medical reason; it was a sociological reason for that, depression and major issues. And so he looked further into that, and he found in his own practice that actually this was strongly affecting many people. So he, as the doctor of a man who had just passed away, and he was a hospice doctor, he would get calls from the person's son in California who was terribly depressed and wanted help, medical help, and he would get calls from that person's close friend seeking some sort of consolation. And he realized that very powerful forces act through people's real-world social networks. These are not the social networks that you find in Facebook or LinkedIn. These are the kinds of social networks that people have been forming for hundreds of thousands of years, and that we've only been able to measure and see now, today. And so he's done a number of studies. One study he found that made worldwide news. This professor is Nicholas Christakis. He's actually just recently decamped from Harvard he has a center founded for him at Yale. He's a co-founder of our company. And so he was the first person to spot in the Framingham Heart Study data, which is very important healthcare data, that it had sociological information in the data that was originally intended for administrative purposes. So they asked participants going back through 1950 and on to today, who are your friends? So that in case we lose touch with you, we can find out who your friends. And so he said, wow, this data about who your friends are is incredibly valuable. No one's ever used it before. I'm going to map the entire population of the Framingham Heart Study over the course of 60 plus years or so. So he did that, and then he mapped data onto it like BMI, body mass index, obesity. And this turns out to have been a critical time for the obesity epidemic that hit the US. And so he had a hypothesis, and the hypothesis was that obesity spread was contagious through human social networks, that it wasn't contagious like a virus, but it was contagious like a rock song through human social networks. And so he observed this in the Framingham Heart Study data, and he came up with the fact that, in fact, social networks were the most powerful explanatory factor in explaining why people were becoming obese. So if, for example, if all we knew about you was that your friends were becoming obese, then it was vastly more likely that you also were becoming obese. But if all we knew about you was that your friends were not becoming obese, it was vastly more likely that you were not becoming obese. And so he published this paper. This would have been probably in the late 2000s. And this got worldwide attention. And you may remember some of the stories on this. I think it was he was one of the Times most influential people of the year and that sort of thing. And it was headlines like, "Your friends are making you fat," or "You are making your friends fat," or some variation on that. But it turns out that all sorts of behaviors spread through people's real-world social networks. So depression spreads through people's real-world social networks. Altruism spreads through people's real-world social networks. Smoking spreads through real-world social networks. That kind of makes sense. So does smoking cessation also spreads through people's real-world social networks. And so it turns out, you may have heard of all these wellness programs trying to get people to walk more or sleep better or whatever, and they're often one-to-many programs where an authority comes in and tries to persuade people to exercise more, for example, or to eat less. And it turns out that the most powerful single factor is actually that person's peers. And furthermore, if you can map the social networks and you could in theory map the complete social network of everyone at MIT to each other. We have mapped the complete social network of all the physicians in America to each other. And if you have the right data, it takes certain kinds of data to be able to do this, then you can map social networks, and then you can find out who the influencers are, who's central to that network, who's influential to it, who's a key bridge between two different clusters. And then you can target very differently. So a classic example would be that if you had some program where you wanted to have people change behavior, so that program might be to have people in a large enterprise, that program might be to adopt Microsoft SharePoint. That might be your program. We just spent all this money on infrastructure, we just spent all this money on increased bandwidth, we just spent all this money on licenses, and now we're going to adopt Microsoft SharePoint. And so we had a standard initiative to adopt it, and people didn't adopt it. And so now we've spent all the money on adopting it, but we're not doing work group and collaboration any better than we were before. How do we fix that? And so Activate Networks would come in and say, here's your company's complete professional social network. And you were using departmental structures before, which are formal, but which don't actually get on your side, the key influencers, the key central people, and those they influence. And so a better approach would be to start with these central people and people they influence and get them and flip those to get them to adopt the behavior you want them to adopt. And then you'll get a lock-in effect of social influence, of people who work closely together. This is a lot like demographics. It's sort of like we just, in big business in America, they rediscovered modern demographics in like 1950s or so. And demographics is information like how old are you, how wealthy are you, where do you live, what's your gender. That's demographics. But social network data, when you can get it, is different. Social network data says that you're part of cluster 56. 56 is a great cluster to be part of because it spends a lot and it's highly connected with itself. That's social network data. And you, in that, you have 9 strong personal friends in that network, which is great because the average person has 6, so you're above average in that way. And you have a network neighborhood of 143 people who are strongly tied to you after 3 degrees of separation. And that's also good because that's above average too. And then we can look at prior adoption campaigns, prior campaigns to have you adopt certain behavior like buy something. And we can say that yes, influence really did pass through you in those prior campaigns and strongly influence those around you. So boom, we're going to give you a high influence index ranking of 99%, for example. And we're going to say that future marketers should get on your side and try to persuade you to adopt the behavior first. And so this is an example of the sort of thing that we do. Let's see, I'm going to try to, I see that I've got a conflict here between PowerPoint and Skype, so I'm going to turn off Skype. Hold on a second.
They could join the class.
So that's an idea of what social network analysis is, and in the past, you could never see social networks, and so therefore you couldn't utilize them like you would demographic data. But today we're actually capturing all sorts of relational data or transactional data, which can be used to get at relational data. And so we're generating this vast amount of information on social networks, real world social networks, not online social networks, that is kind of being let go into the atmosphere like exhaust right now. But in certain cases, like with the transactions that doctors have among themselves, this is being saved. It's a big data issue. So in the past it was too expensive to save this data. Today it's trivially expensive to save all this data about people's interactions and relationships with each other. In the past, the science of social network analysis was not very powerful. Today it's very powerful and very explanatory. And in the past, it took only the world's largest government agencies had the processing power to do the kind of analysis that we do. And today, a startup with $15 million in backing can do this easily. So a lot of the that makes social network analysis a lot more accessible to people today. So you could have a brand manager at a consumer goods company could retain us to do social network analysis of their customers, or you could have a Fortune 500 company, VP of HR might retain us to do a social network analysis of their company's complete professional social networks. So that's a little bit about us. And so what basically happened was a Harvard professor met with a health IT venture capitalist, for coffee. I think that the Harvard professor, one of his students was the son of the health IT venture capitalist, and that gave birth to this company about 3 years ago. And I heard about it and joined about 3 years ago. So that's an example of Activate Networks and what we do. So an overview of my presentation tonight. So the desired outcome of this meeting is that you know that you could apply a go-to-market strategy framework to your product, and you could present it to an investor. That's what I'd like to try to achieve here tonight for you. I'd like it to be more a discussion than a lecture, so please interrupt any time. And then I'm actually going to try to ask for volunteers to do on the spot a go-to-market strategy for you right now, and we'll turn off the video recording before that part of this. I also am going to assume that you're all entrepreneurs, and so we'll also have time to discuss entrepreneurial constraints, like I don't have any time, I don't have any budget, I don't have any data, and that sort of thing. So what do you do? And I certainly have faced all of that myself. So I'll start with just a definition. A go-to-market strategy is an action plan that specifies how a company will reach customers and achieve competitive advantage. And typically covers whom are you selling it to, what exactly are you selling, how much are you selling, how are you going to promote it, where are you going to promote it. And the term is often associated with product launches, but it can also be used to describe the specific steps a company needs to take in order to guide customer interactions for existing products. So my company, it's a little unusual for a 3-year-old startup. We sell 3 products in 3 totally different markets, so we've had to have 3 different go-to-market strategies. So one of our strategies is that we sell enterprise analytics products to the VP of HR of the Fortune 1000 companies. And so for this, we've adopted, as a marketing strategy, primarily an inbound marketing strategy. We're creating content for these kinds of people. We go and find them where they live, and we educate them about our product and how it's more powerful than typical demographics. And that's the air war. And then the ground war is that we have hired a direct sales force that has HR backgrounds, and they call upon the VP of HR and other people in the HR suite to try to do solution selling, to try to identify what problems they have there that were addressable with our technology. So the second kind that we sell is we sell sales targeting optimization product to pharma brand managers. So many of you probably are prescribed some sort of branded pharmaceutical that you're taking right now, and there's someone at that pharma company whose day-to-day job is to be responsible for that drug and everything about that drug and has the budget for that drug. And that person's called pharma brand manager or marketing manager, that sort of job title. And for these people, we can give them a social network map of the physicians that they sell to. So they may be very concerned about all the physicians who prescribe diabetics drugs in the greater Chicago area, for example. They come to us and we could give them a social network map of all those physicians, what communities of practice they have self-divided into, and who are the influencers in those. And so they could literally, instead of treating all physicians equally, or instead of targeting only high volume prescriber physicians, which is very common in the pharma industry, they can instead say we're going to target high influencers in wave 1, and then in wave 2 we're going to target the physicians that they influence who are at their moment of maximum receptivity because the physician that they most respect in their professional career has adopted the behavior that we want them to adopt, and that's called contagion marketing. And it goes from the high influencers in wave 1 with the right amount of investment per person there to then you see who adopts, maybe half adopt, for example. So then in wave 2 you look at people they influence, maybe they each influence 9 doctors strongly, for example, so then you have a different per capita budget for wave 2 to target the people who are strongly influenced by the people who converted in the last round. So for that, in that case, we've also have developed an inbound marketing strategy here, which is to create content so valuable that they would expect to pay for it, that our audience would expect to pay for it. And it's about how pharma brand managers can get ahead in their career in the coming years. And of course, it weaves the story of our product into that because our product is a new scientific product that's very well validated and they can improve their effectiveness, and they're under a lot of pressure to improve their effectiveness. And then once again, we also have a pharma direct sales force as well who calls upon these people who have raised their hand and said, I'm interested during our marketing efforts, and call upon them and try to work out with a solution sales approach how to interact with them. And then our third line of business is we sell products to hospital executives. Hospital executives also care enormously about the physicians and their local communities around them. And in this case, we realize that there's far too many hospitals for us to sell to directly. And the sale is too complicated. There's multiple different kinds of products involving physician influence and physician social network maps that could be sold. And so we partnered with a company called Premier, which is the largest hospital group purchasing organization, which is a very large existing sales force. And we said we can't expand our reach enough to cover all the hospitals in America. It's very hard to get into hospitals. But here's a company whose primary job is being a group purchasing organization for hospitals, already has all the relationships, and is looking to sell analytics products as well as saline bags to hospitals. And so we partnered with Premier, which is an outstanding company that already has the relationships into to hospitals. So that's an example of the go-to-market strategy for my company, a young company that sells 3 different products in 3 different lines of business. So the next thing I thought I would do is play a game here, and the game is that I'm going to describe a product's go-to-market strategy, and I'm going to see if you all can figure out what the product is. Okay, so here's a product that is, and let me see if I'll try moving a little bit so that you can see the background a little better. So the product is an over-the-counter drug, and the target is older consumers in America, a mass market target. And it's an aspirin that's gentle on your stomach. That's the product. The price is the same as the market leader, which is Bayer aspirin. And they promote on TV ads. This is I don't watch television today, but this is when I did watch television. They were still doing this. They run TV ads on primetime network TV, and they do shelf promotion at the point of sale. That's how they promote. Good guess. And their channel is supermarket chains and drugstore chains because they can't sell it direct themselves, they think. And their unique selling proposition is that they're gentler on your stomach than aspirin. Does anyone know? It could be some of those. It's bufferin, which is an ordinary aspirin that has buffers in it. So a lot of people who take aspirin over time develop irritation to taking aspirin, so they would fall back onto this. Especially older people might have taken a lot of aspirin in their lives and have developed an irritation to aspirin. So that's an example, but today there's lots of over-the-counter pain relievers that would have a similar pitch to this. But this company had to figure out how are we going to sell against the market leader, and they came up with a great point of differentiation, and this is how they went to market. So the next one I'll do is premium flowers. So here's a company. Each of these has something that makes it radically different than your average business model. In the last case, it was just standing apart by being gentler on your stomach than the leading aspirin. But the target is flower lovers, which tends to skew toward upper middle class people and women. Their product was a premium decorative flower that lasts longer than your typical flowers. The price is competitive with store-bought flowers if you subscribe for a year. So you'll actually get better flowers than you could get in the store, but you have to subscribe for a year. So for some people, in their own heads, they're thinking, well, I'm going to get at least one bunch of flowers for myself per month anyway, so I might as well get better flowers. and subscribe. For promotion, they did direct mail and direct email, infomercials explaining their value, specialty magazines about flowers. This is how they reach this hard-to-reach flower lover. And for their channel was direct. When you're dealing directly with them. You're not going to a drugstore to buy them. They're going direct to you. In fact, they mail it. They actually cut themselves out. They mail from growers who put their brand on the flowers and mail it direct to the consumer of the flowers, so that it seems to have come from this company, but actually it's come directly from the grower. And in doing so, they prolong the flower life even more because there's no intermediate point. And flowers, the flowers that you may get in a local store around here have probably been sitting around for quite a long time in the supply chain and may start to look bad after only a few days. And these cut flowers will look great for weeks, basically.
The 1-800-Flowers?
Good idea. I believe, and I'm not sure about this, 1-800-Flowers actually goes and finds a local florist who gets their flowers through the ordinary flower supply chain and not direct from growers, and has them delivered to you. So it would be fascinating to contrast these business models. The 1-800-Flowers business model has been around for a long time, and this was 10 years ago. This was considered to be an extremely novel business model, and probably has not been copied much. So the idea of not partnering with local flower shops, for example, was going direct was very novel, and the unique selling proposition is higher quality and lasts longer than anyone else. And this is Calyx flowers. It was also called Calyx and Corolla. And this was a one-woman entrepreneur who basically was a flower lover herself, and figured out that she could that if she could only find the flower lovers and get them to sign up for a year's subscription, she'd have her own business with a highly differentiated business model and could go direct to growers, and has been very successful with this. So, and the reason I go, and each one of these is something that's very differentiated about them. And in this case, it is the idea of that she's going direct to growers, and growers are mailing it through the postal system, same day that they're cut. But putting the brand of Calyx flowers on it, so you don't know it came from the grower. You think that it came from some big office building somewhere, or factory somewhere. Next is safety razors. So this is very new, but their target is young to early middle-aged men, and their product is razors and razor blades. And their price is a discount if you buy a subscription to razor blades. So that's very novel. The vast majority of people that I know have never bought a subscription to razor blades. They promote through search engine optimization, through search engine marketing, through online display ads, through viral videos. Has anyone heard of this one?
I've heard of it, but I can't think of what the name is.
Yep. So it's Dollar Shave Club.
Yeah.
And they came out they said, gosh, somehow Gillette has this sort of stranglehold on the retail chain to the end user, and it's possible to get much less expensive blades than Gillette charges for, but it's hard to get them to that end user. So let's go direct to the end user, and let's also reduce our risk somewhat by having people subscribe to these. So you could literally buy shaving blades for $1 each, from this company, whereas with Gillette it's probably well over $5 each, for example. And then the next one is their channel was direct, so you would respond to an ad online. It was overwhelmingly online ads, including viral videos, believe it or not. Part of their business model was to make videos go viral, which they succeeded in doing. And if you dealt with them directly, they would mail you directly the product, so they don't have other partners involved. And their unique selling prospect was they were hip, and they were discount, and you'd never run out of blades because they would keep arriving even if you didn't use them. And you never had to go to the store, and you never had a shaving experience where it felt really raw afterwards because that was the only one you had left, and that sort of thing. So that's another example of go-to-market strategy. Groceries. So target middle-class households, major metro areas. The product was groceries. The price is a full price. It's a competitive price, but full price for the groceries. They promote, once again, through search engine optimization, search engine marketing, online display ads, billboards, ads on trucks. Now this sounds very different from your typical supermarket, if that's the way that they're marketing. Their channel is direct and with partners. Their partner in Boston is Stop and Shop. And their unique selling, say again? Peapod, yep. So, and their unique selling proposition is fill your shopping cart on your iPad and then have it be delivered to your home. And then here's another one, premium cable TV channels. So part of the reason I'm doing this is just to familiarize yourself with all these issues and to show you that it doesn't have to be super hard. The answers to these questions, which analysts can puzzle over for days, doesn't have to be all that hard. But there was a premium cable TV channel, and they said we're targeting 20 to 45-year-old taste-leading urban consumers who are mostly men, and our product is a cable TV channel. And it's going to include edgy new movies that feature actual movie stars. So at the time that this is not brand new, this has been around for a while, but at the time, if you ever saw a movie star on cable, it was going to be like 6 months after that movie star had made the movie and it appeared first in theaters. And then cable had its chance, so it wasn't a new movie anymore. And so this particular cable channel said we're going to have real movie stars, not TV stars, and we're going to have them be in new proprietary movies that you can only get on our channel. And then we're going to charge more for our channel. So you typically buy your channels as a bundle of channels through a partner like a cable network like Comcast, for example. They said we're going to make actual proprietary movies that we make, and we're going to put actual real movie stars in them, and then they're only available on our cable channel, and then we're going to charge more for our. So that's what they did that was different. And then we're going to promote this through urban billboards and other display in urban areas and urban magazines, and we're going to self-promote a lot on cable. So if you ever watch our cable channel, you're going to see tons of promotions about how great we are on our own channel. And their channel to market was through cable providers like Comcast. Because of the way cable was set up, they had no direct way at the time to go straight to consumers. And their unique selling proposition is that they have new proprietary movies with actual movie stars in them that you can only get on their channel. Can anyone guess what business model this is?
HBO.
HBO, yeah. And that was considered to be really radical at the time. And movie stars in Hollywood were saying, "Am I going to hurt my career by being on this HBO movie, where I really have to manage my exposure and be only on blockbusters that come out of Hollywood that people pay for at the box office?" But it worked for HBO and for the movie stars. And the last one, I'll do a hardware component. So here, there's a manufacturer of a hardware component. Their target is the consumers of digital devices. Their product is a unique screen technology for devices. Their pricing is competitive with existing options. Existing options, the classic one would be an LCD screen. They do co-promotion with device manufacturers to promote it to the target audience. Their channel is that they're screen technology, and so they are not standalone, and so they have to sell the device through device manufacturers. And their unique selling proposition is that their screen draws little power and is visible in strong sunlight. Does anyone know this company? It's actually a big Boston success story. So this is E-Ink, yeah. And their partner, so they pursued this strategy for years and years, and they and only I think with the Kindle Fire did they actually finally find a hit product for it. So they tried like billboards that change to any shape, any message you want on the billboard. That worked, but was not a hit product for them, and so it took them quite a long time until finally. And part of the if they raised tons of money themselves, they could possibly have gone direct, and they might have found a hit product sooner. But they had to work with device manufacturers who were willing to work with them and ready to try to promote something strongly. And that all came together with them for the Kindle Fire. So
if you guys ever want to see an interesting, Russ Wilcox was the CEO, and Eric Paley from founder. What's his name in that group? Anyway, Eric interviewed him, and it's on YouTube someplace. If you go to Founders Collective, you'll find it there. But it's a fascinating story because they almost went out of business like 6 times. I mean, it was amazing. They ran out of money, but they made it, and then there was a pretty big exit where they were purchased by somebody big. Forget it.
And E-Ink, so at MIT, more than at other institutions, you might expect to have some sort of science project. It's a science project that is not a product yet, and that might be a brand new category, perhaps much more effective than existing products. And your puzzle might be how to figure out how to put together a company and make a product and then go to market with it. And so E-Ink was an example of that. It was a science project that had all these interesting properties that, for example, when you turned the power off, the screen stayed the way it was instead of all the content disappearing. Or that it looked like an ordinary piece of paper in bright sunlight instead of most of your phones you wouldn't be able to view them in bright sunlight. So they had to figure out many puzzles and they went to market many times in many different strategies, and they also had a bumpy road for a while until they finally had some hit products. My own company is also started as cutting-edge science, licensed with IP from Harvard Medical School, and then we've had a similar challenge of trying to figure out what is the exact product and what would we charge for it and who's going to buy it, what budget a large company is going to buy it. So that's it. So now I'm going to talk about the kind of market analysis you should be thinking about, and then the go-to-market strategy. So for market analysis, you should try to write up a product overview of what you think this could be. If you're early stage, this could be just a thesis of what your product is, what its benefits are, who's going to buy it, why are they going to buy it. That's the product overview. And you should be thinking about who would be interested in this solution. So at my company, we use what's called a persona system. So the persona system tries to get it down to the level of a specific fictitious person. So if we say that the HR budget in the Fortune 1000 is going to buy our product, that's good, but that's not good enough. Who is it going to be? Is it going to be the benefits manager in the HR department? Is it going to be the knowledge management person in the HR department? Is it going to be the sort of special projects part of the HR department? Is it going to be the VP of HR, who's the hardest to reach of all? Is that who it's going to be in the HR budget? So who's going to buy it? And then we actually develop a persona around that person. We try to find out what's their average age, what's their typical gender, what are they thinking about, how do they get ahead in their job at work. We package that together. So who would be interested in this solution? Who are the users of this? Users are different than buyers, and often if you're selling in the B2B market, which my company does, you have to figure out how do you appeal to both the buyers and the users. Sometimes buyers include blockers. There might be a CFO at a company who doesn't want the company to spend $100,000 in the next 6 months, and so you have to be able to figure out how to talk to that person and how to line up support inside the company. The VP of HR may engage in collaborative decision making and may have 5 or 6 other people at the company that they want to get on board with the idea before they go put their own neck out on the line. They should sign a big contract for it. So who are the buyers? Who are the users? What's the current problem that you're solving? There's also market research, which typically looks into issues like what could you realistically charge for this product? What are comparators? Who's the competition that's out there? How many people would possibly buy this product? How fast might it grow? What's your benefit compared to the benefit of other products that are out there? So that there's market research to do. An example of this that a colleague of mine looked into recently was that Oracle has a CRM solution, and so that's a unique case, but you might expect that the best market for the Oracle CRM solution is current Oracle customers, for example. So that helps you get an idea as to the potential size of the market. And you might have a plan where you think you'd have relatively easy sale to current Oracle customers, but you might have a much harder sale and try it later to non-Oracle customers. So then there's your competitors, your competitive landscape, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis. Product positioning, and I'll get into that a little bit more, and then unique selling propositions. So this is some of the market analysis that you should be doing, and I'll go into some of these in a little more depth than others, and I'll make these slides available at the end of the presentation. So product positioning is issues like who do we want to sell to? That's the target. What are we selling? What's the benefit that we're selling? Why should they believe us? Which is give them a reason to believe. And then, what's the feeling that the brand evokes? This is typical product positioning. So I'll do this now for, we have a product called Retention Connect at our company, and it allows VPs of HR to see who is a flight risk based on their position in the network and their behavior in the network. And typically they want to retain these people. And so it allows them to go out and pay special attention to people who are likely flight risks. So an example, I'll go into the product a little bit. You can map the complete professional social network of an organization. And you might find, for example, that you onboarded a world-class expert in geology. Let's say that you're an energy company. And 2 years ago, you onboarded a world-class expert in geology who earns about $400,000 a year and could work at any company in the industry. and you look at the network and you find this person is on the extreme periphery of the company's social network and has only one strong tie in the company after 2 years of being with the company. Well, that's a pattern that we would call poor onboarding. And so this person probably cost about $400,000 to recruit to the company and probably makes about $400,000 at the company, and it probably feels that he can't be successful in his job at this company. He's been relatively ignored and has not been a contributor. And he could go work for any other company in the energy industry right now. And so by spotting that this person is on the periphery of the company's social network, you can say that this person and not the other 30,000 employees of the company is a flight risk, and I as the VP of HR should take some action. And it will even tell me that here are some central people, some high influencers, some highly effective people in the organization, and I should tie this person into at least one of them, because that will make this person immediately more central to the organization. I can re-onboard this person 2 years after they joined and make the person more successful in the company. So that would be an example. So who do we want to sell to? Well, in this case, it's the VP of HR who has the budget and is going to make the decision. That's the primary person that we sell to. And then what are we selling? We're selling an analytics product that can have a benefit in this one instance of saving the company another $400,000 search, for example. And why should they believe us? And well, we have proprietary methodologies licensed from Harvard Medical School and Harvard University. And what's the feeling that the brand evokes? In our case, we want it to be cutting-edge science. That's what our company does. That what we do is validated, and that they can count on what we do actually works. And in HR, that's saying something, because HR is a very touchy-feely area where there's lots of different methodologies that tend to rise and fall in popularity over time without any kind of closed-loop reporting on whether they worked or not. But in our case, we can show that our technology works. So that's an example of product positioning for our Retention Connect solution. The next is a typical product overview or description. So I wanted to give you one, and I thought this was good by B2B standards. Although you can certainly, if you're in a B2C world, you can make it a lot more interesting than this. But I found on the web a good example of a product overview or description from IBM. So IBM Sterling B2B Integrator enables the security-rich integration of a complex B2B process with diverse partner communities. It provides a single flexible B2B gateway that enables companies to meet a wide range of B2B integration needs. IBM Sterling B2B Integrator can improve business processes beyond enterprise boundaries and increase visibility into and across supply and demand chains. So on the one hand, I would say that for very complicated software products that are being sold to very sophisticated CIO buyers, this is very good. I'd say this is very good in the sense that it is relatively complete and does a good job explaining this. Now, and some people will want to read this in order to understand your product. Very often you're trying to be a little simpler than this, especially if you have a simpler product and you're in a simpler market. If you're in the B2C market, you're trying to make your description much more appealing about what it does. But I wanted to give you an example of what I thought was a pretty long and thorough one. This would be for more internal planning purposes, and also for a couple steps down the sales funnel when someone wants to try to understand your complicated product better. So here's another thing I thought I'd spend more time on. Here's an example of a persona. So here's a persona, Kate Wellens. She's the Senior Vice President of Human Resources at a US Fortune 500 company. This is a made-up persona. So her background, the HR function is struggling to prove its value to the business. However, senior leaders are also calling for top talent and rely on HR to produce. So this is what's going on in this person's mind all the time. And I remember I once worked at a large company where the head of HR was not included in most important meetings and was not highly regarded by the team, not because he was a bad executive, but because HR in general didn't get a lot of respect in that particular group. Sales did get a lot of respect, and that's often a dynamic that you'll find at large companies. And then this VP of HR came to one of the senior management meetings, and he said, you know, excessive turnover is the single greatest controllable cost we face as a company. If we could get our turnover from 8% down to 5%, which it used to be in the past, that would lead to a very large cost savings for the company. And to do that, we have to pull a lot of HR levers and help sort of boost morale at the company, find out why certain kinds of people who have a certain career profile have been leaving us, give people to do more company meetings where we get people on board with why they should be excited to be at our company, etc. So that's an example of how what's going on in the lives of HR managers and how they go from being a cost center to being a strategic center inside the company. HR's role is expected to become more integrated and to gain a strategic importance in a talent business operations. And that's about that, businesses go back and forth about this. Sometimes they view HR as more of a cost center, and other times they look to it to supply the competitive advantage for the firm. And there are certain businesses like software development or consulting where HR really has to be a major strategic asset for the firm. Now, HR departments are expected to become more data-driven, more proactive, and more strategic over the coming year. Well, that's great because we're an analytics company. We provide data, and so we can talk to that person about this expectation at their company and what they're currently doing to meet this expectation, and how we could help them meet that expectation. Demographics in this particular case, most often female. Their average age is about 51. They all have bachelor's degrees, and about 41% have postgraduate degrees. So that's an example of a buyer persona that helps everyone in our marketing department, everyone in our sales department, everyone in our client services department, even our engineers, our operations, our science people. They all become familiar with this over time, and they have lots of questions that they're wondering about answers to, and they can refer to this. And the true version of this document is about 4 pages long. It's not one slide long. Also, you should try to focus in on what is the current problem of potential users. So ideally, you should have a problem that's a big problem and a solution that's a very elegant, positive solution, one that you can even measure the value of. So I'll just throw one out here. It's one of my favorite ones. I'm living in a world right now where people are doing their work in the old types of productivity software and in the new types of productivity software, and people are adjusting their work styles slowly and painfully over time. People are learning the new technologies at different rates. There's an unprecedented call to collaborate across company boundaries. So a lot of the old systems don't work very well because they're designed to prevent you from collaborating with your PR department instead of help you collaborate with your PR department. And so people are using all different kinds of systems, but here's an example. So users of thick client office productivity software, that's Microsoft Office, typically have problems accessing the same documents together at the same time. But cloud-based office productivity applications, so that could be Google Apps for Business, Google Docs, which is the free consumer version of that. It could be Salesforce.com's workflow applications and Chatter. It could be Dropbox. Cloud-based office productivity applications finally allow users to access the same documents at the same time. So I'm in an environment right now where Google Spreadsheet is not as good as Excel, and Google Slides is not as good as PowerPoint, and Google Word Processor is not as good as Word. But everyone wants to use the Google one and not the Microsoft Office system, because of the ability to be in the same document at the same time. That one killer app that they have is enough to change an entire office working environment, so that everyone is saying, I can live with the fact that I can't do special tables in the spreadsheet version. I want everyone to be able to be in the same document at the same time. I'm sick and tired of saying, who's got the master copy of the document, can you send it to me? That sort of thing. So, so this is an example of identifying the problem of potential users. Next, I'll go into some pricing. I'll look at 2 different ways of thinking about pricing. This is what I call the HBS value thermometer. I'm not sure if it's been covered in any of your classes, but basically, this gives you a constructive range to think about how you might be pricing your product. So the first might be what I'll call the objective value. So the seller calculates that if you buy my product, it'll save 4 hours of labor at $25 an hour. Therefore, my product's worth $100. But you probably can't get that $100. People on the other side won't trust you. They don't want to assume all the risk for successful execution, and they want to feel like they're getting a deal in buying this. So they're only going to buy it if it's priced less than that. So you have this objective value, which is pretty much a ceiling for you and your product, which is some measure of the value of the product if it's used correctly in the right circumstances. So I set that arbitrarily at $100. Then there's the perceived value. So if you can persuade this buyer that it's worth $100, then the perceived value could be $90. They would be willing to pay $90 to save $100. And there's risk involved, there's trust involved. They may not totally trust you. that's worth $100. They may not totally trust themselves. They can deliver and execute correctly. And so, they start to become interested when you start saying it's worth 100, but I'll sell it to you for $90 or so. And here's where marketing and sales goes in and tries to show and prove that it really is worth close to that $100, and they really are getting a good deal for the $90. Otherwise, it could slip down below that. And it's also where substitutes around that have various prices can be compared to this. And substitutes can either affirm that it is worth about $90 because you can't buy a substitute anywhere else for less than $90, or they can hurt your ability to sell. Someone can always say, well, it's true that you're differentiated, but I can get something that does pretty much close to that for $60, so I would only buy you for a little over $60, for example. And then there's the products, there's the perceived value in the mind of the customer, and then there's the price that you actually might achieve. So the buyer's says, yeah, it's worth 90, but I'm going to negotiate you down until I feel like I'm getting a good deal on this, so I'll get you down to $80. And then there's your cost of goods sold, which is $40, which you would never let them know what your cost of goods sold was. And in this case, that's a pretty good, your markup here is 100%, and your margin here is 50%, and that's pretty good for the world outside of software licensing. And so this is an example. So you should start. This is called a thermometer because it's a vertical and it has gradations on it. You start trying to accurately kind of figure out what these price points are. And then if you go out there and you find that, for example, that substitutes are for sale for $50, then you might say, well, looking at that, I don't see how we can get more than $50. So in that case, our markup would be 25%, and our margin would be 20% on this, and that's not good enough to be in this business. And so, well, let's not enter the business because we can't justify entering the business. So this is something that a good marketer would have memorized all the different kinds of prices in here, and would have a pretty good idea that they could sell it for 80, and that would give them a good margin as a business before proceeding. So this is one example, and this would be more for a mass-produced product. The next is solution selling, and solution selling goes about this in a very different way. Typically, there's a very highly skilled salesperson who is having long conversations with multiple people at the client company and has discovered some sort of major problem that they have. So the problem could be that they bill slowly, for example, and that there are mistakes in the billing process, and they get invoices sent back to them, for example, and it's because it's a heavily manual process. And maybe they're selling some sort of financial control solution. And so they will actually go and identify pain points in multiple parts of the organization. And so, in fact, for everyone who has a say in the buying process, they're trying to find pain points for those people and having them admit the pain, admit that there is pain here, that it's a problem that is on the order of magnitude that ought to be solved with the other problems that are being solved in their company this year. Then they track the pain throughout the organization, and they calculate a cost of the pain to the different parts of the organization. So this could easily take the cost of the pain from being a $500,000 pain in one department to being a multi-million-dollar pain across the entire organization. And then they propose a solution. Usually it must involve their own enterprise software solution that they're selling at that time. And they show the value of the solution and how that solution is going to address this very large problem at the company. And this solution may involve licenses to their software product, but it may involve a bundle of other things. It may involve some initial setup study consulting. It may involve implementation consulting. It may involve updates in the future. It may involve other things. So they add all these together and they get to a custom price for the organization. So that's a very different way of selling, and a lot of the software companies on 128 do this solution selling. Next is you should try to figure out for your product what is the sustainable competitive advantage. Can it be sustained? If you make a splash, if everyone likes your product and you're in a real market, then the product managers at other companies are going to figure out very quickly what your mix is in your product, and they're going to try to duplicate what you can do. So do you have any tangible advantages like IP and patents? And do you have any intangible advantages, like you're the first in the business to offer a certain feature, or you have cost advantages, etc.? So, and I'll look at, I talked about unique selling propositions. Here's an example of unique selling propositions. There's, and I'll look over here, you know, there's what your brand does well, and then there is what the consumer wants. And that's your unique selling proposition. And so, you know, if the so anyway, that is what the where you want to be, and what and when you speak about your unique selling proposition, you should see where it matches between what the consumer wants and what your brand does well. People are often trying to compare themselves to their competition. The consumer cares less about that message from you than you would think. You should be trying to speak about the consumer and not how you necessarily how you're better than the competition. This gives you an idea of the different factors and what and where you want, you know, what really plays to your strength and what unique selling propositions you are going to message to your buyer. So that was market analysis, and now I'll move on to go-to-market strategy. And so with a go-to-market strategy, you should set an end goal in a year, pick some metrics and measurements. Those are typically things like revenue or volume in the space of a year. The strategy, once more, is, and we've covered this, but this shows in a little more detail. Whom are you going to target in the market? What regions? What segments? What industries? What budgets? What personas? In a B2B setting, in a competitive market, you really have to get into this level of detail and say that we're going to go. I once worked at one company where it sold an HIS, a hospital information sector, software, enterprise software product, and it literally said that we want to sell to community hospitals outside of major urban areas that already use Meditech as their primary hospital information system. That was their. That's an example of how granular this can be, and for that matter, who didn't upgrade Meditech recently, and who. So that there were. This was how they approached the whom to target. It can be that detailed. So the next is what product portfolio are you offering? Maybe you just have one product in mind because it's your startups, but there are companies that would offer that have many products, hundreds of products, and they would try to figure out what is the portfolio we're going to offer here. How much do we charge for our products to different kinds of customers? How will we promote our products to target customers? Examples of this include inbound marketing, which is very topical today, and I'd be happy to tell you more about inbound marketing. There's a direct field-based sales force that's very common in the B2B space. Through a sales channel partner, maybe you can't build your own direct sales force, but you think you could partner with someone else who already has a partner, who already has a channel to the customer. Will you promote and sell your products to target customers? Will you go to trade shows? Will you use your website? Will you use trade journals, email, mobile ads? And then the process of building a go-to-market strategy is trying to identify specific programs and prioritizing by cost and impact. So in a perfect world, you would have an idea of how much sales you would get for how much money, and you'd work out some sort of cost-effectiveness measure, and you would you start filling your budget with the most cost-effective elements of your strategy.
Can you give a high-level definition of inbound marketing, like how it would compare to, say, direct marketing or direct sales?
Sure. So it's a very good question, and I'm in marketing, and this is a 5-year-old trend that's kind of sweeping marketing right now. So in the last 5 years, the buyer journey has fundamentally changed. This is true in the B2C world, and it's also true in the B2B world. So 5 years ago, information was very scarce, and buyers were sort of bombarded by ads. And in order to get things they wanted, they had to, if you wanted to read a magazine article, you had to look at the ad pages that were in there. If you wanted to watch a television show, you had to watch the ads that were on the television show. What's happened in the last 5 years is that buyers' journeys have changed, and buyers have begun to screen out those ads. Those ads are part of what's called outbound marketing to a certain extent. And they've also become super empowered, and primarily they've become super empowered by their ability to do Google searches. But there's many other ways of doing it. It could be something that's pushed to you by your phone. You wanted your phone to tell you about certain things in your locale. They're getting their information from different sources. Their behavior has changed. They're much more likely to learn about things through a blog post than through reading a magazine, an article in a paper magazine, for example. So I'll give a couple of definitions. So outbound marketing is about me and my products and what I have to offer. So a classic example of outbound marketing is, if I'm Gillette, I'm going to put an ad in the Super Bowl. And the ad in the Super Bowl is not going to be about how middle-aged men have fun. It's going to be about how my razor blade has 5 blades on it now, whereas it used to have 4 blades on it now. So it's about the feature and functionality of my product. And so everyone is assembled to watch the Super Bowl game, and I'm going to interrupt them to tell them about my product, which they don't want to hear about, by the way. That's outbound marketing. Outbound marketing is fundamentally me talking about me and going and interrupting people to tell them about me. That's outbound. And we've grown up in that. Most of us have lived all our lives in outbound marketing. Inbound marketing is about our customers, and it's about how they're going to be successful and have fun in the coming year. A good example of inbound marketing is Red Bull. I'm sure all of you have seen the stunts done by Red Bull, whatever it is. They are putting on an amazing spectacle that their drink buyers would pay to watch. Okay, and then they integrate. They never talk about the flavor of Red Bull in those. It's not about how there's a new color can, or how now it has twice the caffeine, or whatever the feature and functionality of the product. It's never about that. Instead, it's incredible entertainment that people would pay for. It happens to have the Red Bull helicopter flying around. It happens to have people dressed in clothing that says Red Bull on it, and happens to maybe show one of them drinking a can at one time. Apart from that, you don't know anything else about the product. You don't know how much sugar it has. You don't know what the can is made of. You don't know, any of that stuff. In our case, what this means is that under outbound marketing, and my company is today, the buyer's journey is changing for different people at different rates. So for a 25-year-old, they have probably shut out most of the traditional outbound style marketing, and they are only accessible by inbound type marketing. But for a buyer at one of our companies who's 51 years old, temperamentally conservative, still reads industry magazines, etc., they may have shifted 50% of the market, or so. So at our company, we from a budget perspective, we spend about 25% of our budget on traditional outbound type marketing, and about 75% of our budget on more inbound marketing. So an example of this different might be that we might have a single piece of paper that's colored that we have worked for hours and hours on. And in the old days, it would have been a product brag sheet. Okay, so this is like, oh my gosh, if you thought that version 1.0 of our product was awesome, let me tell you that version 2.0 of our product is awesomer. And here's what it has in improvements. And this is like Microsoft, the jacket of Microsoft Office. If you ever bought Microsoft Office, it shows you all the features and functionality and a big list and what it has in this version of it. That's outbound marketing. Inbound marketing would be, gosh, so much is changing in the world from a brand manager, and you're expected to do more with less. Your budget got cut, but you've got to bring in the same revenue as you did before. More docs are becoming what's called no-see docs. They won't see drug detailing reps. What are you going to do about that? Well, let me tell you, we have a solution for how you're going to be successful in your job in 2014. That would be more inbound marketing. And the best is if you have such a great package of materials that you can offer, is that people give their permission for you to market to them. It's so good they would buy it. They would pay. Our goal is that a brand manager would pay $500 just to have us give our material to them all in one slug. So it's about them in their buyer's journey and how they can be more successful, and how this is going to help them in their job, and how they're going to have fun with our products. So that's an example. And outbound marketing is about us and our products and our feature functionality, and we're interrupting you in the process of reading your magazine article to tell you about it. Whereas inbound marketing is about you and your buyer's journey and how you're going to be more successful in your job, and you're giving us permission. You like it so much that you sign up and you give us your email and say, yes, send me, this blog post was so good, send me your next one. So that's the difference between the two, and that requires a radical change in skills. And what happens also is that if you're generating all of this content about your buyers and their problems and how they're going to be more successful in their job, then they're going to be searching on these terms. You should have an idea of what words they use to describe their problems, what are the common terms they use. And they're going to be searching for these things. When they start thinking of, how do I cut costs, or how do I improve search targeting, sales targeting optimization, or what are the disadvantages of a concrete pool versus a fiberglass pool, or whatever market that they're in, they're going to be searching for these, and you want your content to be like the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth results in the Google search results for that. And then they'll turn to it, and then they will start to trust you and want to engage with you. And ultimately, when they're ready to buy, they'll want to talk to a sales rep. So that's an example of traditional outbound versus modern inbound marketing. And in our case, we actually have to spend part of our resources on one and part on the other, because our buyer's journey has partly changed, but not entirely changed. So you expect older buyers who are above the money line in companies, who are more temperamentally conservative in more traditional necktie industries, to have not made that change as much. But you expect younger buyers, which I'll just give you an example. In the CTO suite, which we do not sell to in the Fortune 500, they have all switched over entirely to inbound marketing. They don't want to talk to sales reps, and they do searches all day long on what they're to educate themselves, to fill out a matrix that they're building about comparing one product to another. And if you don't have your pricing on your website for them, they're going to audition you without your knowledge, and then say no, and then pass, because you didn't have your pricing, and that made their job harder for them. And they're going to build out a matrix and decide on their own what they want to buy. That's the CTO suite. But we sell to the business unit manager and to the HR VP, and they are not like that as much. And so as they change their buyer's journey, we have to reflect that and adapt to that. We don't get to change. We don't get to stop to say stop or something like that. So does that help?
So what that does? So solution selling is destroyed by that, basically. They're doing all the research so that when they finally do qualify you to come in, it's much less. You can try it, but you've sort of been short-circuited, it sounds like.
It's a very good point. So this is a mega trend that's been rippling through for 5 years, and in certain sectors, you could say, for companies where the founder is under 25 years old, they're going to behave a certain way. For the Fortune 500, they're going to behave a very different way. Budget by budget, I told you the CTO budget behaves differently than the VP of HR budget. So you have to adapt to each of those, and there have been a number of articles that have come out, including in Harvard Business Review, that have said exactly what you're saying, that this process of the buyer says, I get to shut out all these communications, and there's more than enough information available freely to me out there. And in fact, if there's one vendor out of a dozen who's not providing a surplus of information, then I'm just going to cross that vendor off my list because they made my job harder for me, and I'm going to figure it out myself. And I'll call them in when I've made up my mind 70% or so. So that there were articles in Harvard Business Review about that. There certainly are sectors that haven't gone that way. So we'll see how it plays out in different sectors. Solution selling can add a lot of value in certain cases, so it can help a company that may not be adept at understanding how slow invoicing is causing a lot of expenses throughout the company, understand that and then address that in a given year in a very cost-effective way, in a way that makes a lot of sense for the company. So it varies. I think the same article in Harvard Business Review talked about a new kind of solution sales, which is the challenger sales. And so the challenger is able to spot industry trends and goes into a company and says, your real problem is not that your billing is slow, your real problem is you need to be thinking about these other different things that are affecting your industry, and is able to sell at more of a management committee level or a board level to a company and persuade them that they need to change the way that they're doing things. So solution sales is morphing and has to adapt to this. I think I am the target of a lot of solution sales, and when I'm on the phone, I very often am saying, look, I can't spend the time, but just send me something by email or whatever. And they, on the other hand, are trying to very much get me to talk about my problems and my company's problems. And so I see that dynamic playing out, as representing a budget myself. The next is I'll look at, okay, so here is a go-to-market strategy for a product at my company. Whom do we target? We target the VP of HR at the Fortune 500. What is our product? Retention Connect. It uses Zone A to identify fight risks at a company so they can keep them, so they don't have high turnover, which is very expensive, especially in knowledge-intensive companies. How much do we charge? Well, I can't tell you how much we charge, but it's a lot. We typically do it as a cloud-based product on a subscription basis that accrues monthly. And then how do we promote it? Well, we use inbound marketing, a lot of content. We use marketing automation. which has this ability to detect who's interacting with us and our products and our brand online. And we use a direct field sales force. And where do we promote? Well, we use earned media, trade journals, we use email marketing, and we use our website, and we use events. Those are some of the primary ways that we promote. We're promoting to every large company in America, basically. They all have HR departments. And I'll mention, by the way, that there's some confusion. I mentioned the inbound and outbound. So certain ways of promoting are highly associated with traditional outbound marketing. And certain ways, so for example, postal direct mail is associated with outbound marketing. Trade shows are associated with outbound marketing. Certain modalities or techniques are highly associated with inbound marketing. So search engine optimization is associated with inbound marketing. But those are all modalities, and they could be used in either case. The key difference between inbound and outbound is what it's about. Is it about your product and its features and functionality and what it does? Or is it about your customer and their journey and how they're going to do better in their job in the coming year? And so I spoke with, there's one of the top VPs of marketing in Boston who I met with recently, and we talked about imagining what the first ever trade show booth would look like if it were an inbound trade show booth. So trade show booths they've always been outbound typically, and it's like you show up at a trade show booth and they're like, here's a demo of our product, that's all about our product. And here's some brochures about our product, that's all about our product. And here's some salespeople who can tell you about our product. And here's posters that talk about our product. So we said, what would a trade show booth look like if it was an inbound trade show booth? And so the answer for the VP of HR is this is about how are you going to recognize employees so that they keep their morale, and that morale is boosted in your company, and that employees feel like the company knows about them and cares about them. Here's ways that you can recognize your employees in the coming year. And retention, how are you going to retain all your employees and your most valued employees in the coming year? Here's a section here about how you're going to retain that, and it would be information that's more valuable than what you would get in a bookstore on the same topics, and they would be willing to pay for it, and they're delighted to load up on it. So imagine the behavior of the VP of marketing at a trade show conference. They walk down this aisle of trade show booths, and everyone is trying to call them into their booth to tell them about their software. And after a while, they just get tired of this. And then there's this one booth that's not trying to call them into the booth, but that everyone is interested in. And it's the booth that has material that's more valuable than what you get in the bookstore about how you're going to succeed in your job in the coming year. It's hitting all of the major points that surveys say that VPs of HR care most about. So that would be this is.
Have you guys done this?
No one's ever done it before. So maybe my company could be the first to do it. We've had some firsts in my company. So we took a proactive approach to making infographics, which are graphical representations of what used to be formerly white papers or research reports, and we present them differently. And the thing about infographics is that people can absorb them faster, and they also share them more readily than they would share a 20-page white paper, for example. And so we've done industry firsts in doing infographics in some more temperamentally conservative industries where people hadn't done them before. But no one's ever done an inbound trade show booth. Probably would cost $100,000 to do it well, but I throw the idea out there for some innovative person to go and do the first ever inbound trade show booth. That's company A. That's my company, the go-to-market strategy for one of our products, and I wanted to throw it open to someone else. Here, I'll leave it here so that we can see this framework here. But does anyone have a product that they have in mind? And with that, we're turning off video recording. And does anyone want to talk about how we could talk about their go-to-market strategy? And I can try to engage in kind of a back and forth Q&A or you can also feel free to ask questions about any part of the presentation.